Bonjour, Madame et Monsieur. C'est un plaisir pour moi d'être ici, avec vous aujourd'hui à Québec. Je tiens à remercier Joanne et Kimberly. Je m'avoir donné l'occasion de parler devant vous. Je suis québécois de naissance. J'apprends le français. J'ai hâte de pratiquer mon français avec vous à la conférence. Merci beaucoup. I'm honored to speak to you today. When I was asked to discuss the status of mining finance from the eyes of a veteran, I decided to pause and think about it. I came from a mining family. My father was a professor of mining and metallurgy at McGill University. Prior to that, he worked as an engineer for Noranda Inco and was mine captain of a mine that I have fond memories of, the Wade Amulet mine, 8 kilometers from Rouyn-Noranda, where, as I said, he was mine captain. I joined the United States Marine Corps in 1962 after working at Gaspé Copper Mine as a teenager for 2 summers. I also went to Boston to watch my uncle. Took me to a baseball game, Ted Williams' last game at Fenway Park. I started in the investment business as a research analyst in Old Montreal with a company called Nesbitt Thompson on the corner of Rue Saint-Jacques and Saint-Pierre, which led me to find my first mining client, which was a subsidiary of Canadian Pacific called Cominco. So in the research department of Nesbitt Thompson in those days, we truly had legends in there, including one man who invented the bought deal, which virtually everybody knows. But all the companies that people wanted to cover were all taken. So I was told by my boss to go upstairs to the tiny library in Old Montreal and see if I could find something to cover. So I ended up finding Canadian Pacific, and the only reason it was available is nobody wanted to cover it. It was too complex. But they were very, very involved in the mining business, in the coal mining and oil and gas. And so I took this on as a project and produced a 110-page report, which was long in those days. With the help of Lawrence Bloomberg, who became the founder of First Marathon, very successful guy, him and I went on the road to market this in Chicago, Boston, and New York. We had this philosophy of producing high-quality research because people paid for it, and they paid for it in spades. So one Quebec-based institution, actually, I took a picture of their office here in Quebec City, Caisse de dépôt, Département de Quebec. They were a client of ours, occasionally. But when we had a new issue that we didn't call them on, they got very upset and called us and said, don't assume the case doesn't want to see what you have to say. And they promptly encouraged us, not encouraged, they promptly installed a direct line to our trading office, trading desk. In 1991, at Nesbitt Thompson, I started with a couple of my colleagues, the mining team that is now the famous BMO conference, and sort of reminds me of this when I started it all those years ago at Whistler, British Columbia, where it continued to operate for a number of years. But the strategy we wanted to bring together exploration companies because they weren't getting any attention that they deserved, and they were providing the future of this industry in terms of resources and new ore bodies that they found, because the exploration was being done largely by the juniors. So today, that has changed dramatically. We have very few funds that participate. in exploration companies. So we decided to, when I formed Salman Partners in 1994, we decided to continue that model, and for a long period of over 20 years, we had great success in telling largely exploration stories to institutions. We took risks and we took risks and gave great opportunities to people that were unknown. But we had some early supporters, which one of them was Ross Beatty, although at the time it was his second company. And there's a great story that we did the first cross-border deal, and he called me at the West Coast, Bamfield in British Columbia, which is the start of the West Coast Trail on Vancouver Island. And he says, I want to raise some money. And I said, how much? And he said, $10 million. And I said, well, Ross, the problem is I'm on the West Coast Trail, just about to start it. Can it wait 4 days? He paused, and he said, yes, it can. He's an outdoors person, so he said, yes, it can wait 4 days. So we proceeded to do the first cross-border deal with him. So we found rare companies that people really liked, and we went with people like Ross and someone like John McCuskey, who now runs, I think it was a $15 billion company, and Alamos was one of our early picks. We financed that in one summer day, and we agreed to the terms on my dining room table, and from there we had great support. The stock had a market cap of $20 million at that time, went down to $500,000, and then John was able to buy Mulatto's, which for $20 million, which produced since then to now about $800 million of cash flow. So it was a big winner, but he financed it like many people in those days, with mortgaging his house. So today, institutions are far and few between in terms of supporting junior mining companies. But in the early 90s and 2000s, they were strong supporters, and that's why we were able to do very large transactions with unknown companies for the most part. Today, the institutions are not very prevalent because, I give you an example. Gluskin and Chef was a client of ours, and I brought in a company called Grand Cache Coal, and we were looking for $10 million. And Ira Gluskin was a fund manager at the time, and he said he was smoking a cigar. He smokes Cuban cigars in the top in his Bay Street office. You could hardly see him. And he put up his hand. He said, why don't you get these nice people at Salman Partners to raise you $50 million? What he was really saying is he would contribute a lead order if we did that. And so, but Ira was a great believer in the mining business and exploration companies, and he had the vision that many people don't have. So today, what do we do? Since the retail investor is no longer prevalent, what is happening is that the issues are getting smaller. They are getting upsized, but in a modest way, not the way that Ira Gluskin was talking to me many years ago. So, and the other problem is the issuers, the juniors, keep coming back, and oftentimes they talk about the next issue when you're selling you the first one, which is a real no-no, because people say, well, I'll just wait for the next one. So, and another thing, the flows through shares have been a godsend in many ways, but a curse in others. By that I mean that they clip the warrants and sell the shares and often, and you have a down pressure on the stock that lasts a long time. But because the flow-throughs are the only market of any size, it's a kiss, it's a kiss of death. But on the other hand, internationally, of course, it doesn't. You're back to producing hard dollars and good stories. So, in Nesbitt Thompson in the 80s, we wrote our own research reports. We marketed them endlessly on trains and planes, where the bigger players were. Today, we have a lot of large players that are individuals like Eric Sprott, Rob McEwen, sometimes others, but generally speaking, there's very, very few players like that. Streaming companies, of course, are providing. You heard one of my colleagues who used to work for me, Haytham, speak yesterday. Wheaton and others, we were one of the first financiers of Wheaton. Wheaton and others provided streaming opportunities, and they're great opportunities that didn't exist for some time ago. You can take a look at the Artemis. Stephen Dean at Atlantic Gold tried to raise money, and I remember running into him at a conference like this, and he said, there is no money for this kind of company. And then he ran into Ryan Beatty, who's a real estate developer in British Columbia, quite a successful guy, and he provided his first big order. In Artemis, Ryan Beatty is the largest shareholder. So there are people like Ryan Beatty out there, but they're hard to find. There are players like the Saudis. They are we've got a group coming in next week to talk to. They want to talk to mining companies, but they're more interested in large companies and not smaller ones. But we have a good turnout. But what can be done? I always use the example of Australia, and I've been to Perth many times, but in the skylight you always see great support for the mining industry. By that I mean you'll see the logos of BHP, RTZ, and foyers named after them. So it's a real mining community that's quite evident. Whereas hard to find a mining company with its logo on the top of a high-rise in Canada. It's just not the culture. Part of the problem is the educational system really doesn't promote mining, and it's important, especially today in the day and age of tariffs and green energy and whatnot. So Pierre Lassonde in trying to acquire Elk Valley, which was a client of mine at Canadian Pacific, it was called Fording Coal. And Ian Sinclair, who was the CEO at the time, always believed that that asset had the potential to produce the greatest the greatest cash flow of any one of his companies except the oil and gas company, Canadian Petroleum. So, it was very, very supported by many institutions, and at the time we raised money for Fording Coal. But today it's almost impossible to get that kind of support. So, and Mr. Sinclair himself would go on a roadshow. So, Teck ended up to be one of my clients, and they bought Cominco. We acted for them, and it's been a huge success. And what is missing though is the institutional support. The other ones that were strong in supporting juniors was Teck itself. Teck was the biggest player to support juniors, and any one time they probably had 50 junior investments, and they were sizable, and they ante up each time. One example that they are still an investor in and ante up at higher prices is Kodiak Copper. So I think more has to be done to increase pension funds like in Australia, to support the mining industry. And how do they do that? Well, in Australia, I think they're mandated to. That's part of their DNA. They have to support the mining industry, and they rarely leave Australia, and nobody takes over BHP or RTZ. It's just not, it's not going to happen. Whereas in Canada, somebody can take over Elk Valley, as Glencore did. There wasn't much opposition. Christy Friedman was the minister, and I talked to Pierre Lassade, and his comment to me was, she's not going to do anything. And that's telling. That's a telling story of sort of not in your own backyard. We like the industry, but really don't want to support it because it has all this negative connotation, as young people seem to articulate. So I think the pension funds who could support these large deals do have the ability, but they don't. Prem Watts is one of the rare ones, and as you'll notice with Pierre Lassance's recent acquisitions with Orla, that they do step up, and Prem is a large supporter. Another way that we can improve the institutional equity market is to make it more easy for institutions to get regulated. There are many flow-through funds. They're expensive to create, but a hard dollar fund is something that can be encouraged, and these large regulators have the ability to approve them and fast track. When I formed Salman Partners in 1994, in September of 94, we had regulatory approval within 2 months, and the cost was minor compared to now. The regulations have increased so much that the barriers to entry are hard and high. So, I remember when I spoke at St. Andrews by the Sea at an IDA convention, the Quebec minister in charge of securities regulation at the time showed up, and what he was wanting to demonstrate was the amount of regulations that we have to increase every year. And so what he did, in the middle table where he was, he put layers, he put books showing how many regulations have increased year over year over year, and it was almost 6 feet tall, starting from a much smaller base. He was trying to demonstrate a point, which he did. And as much as we regulators try to decrease the regulation, it's really difficult. And the other thing is the mining permitting process, as everybody knows. We've heard our speaker yesterday say how difficult it has been. It's still difficult, but there are signs of hope. I went to a dinner in Vancouver, and Ross Beatty was actually with me on that particular night. And the Premier sat there, and the Premier walked in, probably his third dinner of the night, but he said, put out his hand to Ross and said, "Congratulations on your Lumina Gold deal," which was a $580 million deal that had just been announced. So he was well aware, and very pro-mining, that government. So I think but what I love about this industry is the money that is out there, so stuff it is people find things, and there's a huge amount of exploration activity going on in Canada and abroad, and the juniors need to be supportive. So we as a firm have them come in 2 or 3 a week sometimes to listen to their presentation. Sometimes we do just that. Sometimes we just invest in them. Oftentimes we recommend that they do certain things to improve their profile. So we're doing our part, but other people have to do it too. So But I'm happy that we're here. I'm here today, and I'd like to open up for questions, if possible. If anybody has any questions.
Hello. I really enjoyed your speech. Thank you very much. I'm the chairman of Resoro Strategic Metals. We were a TSXV listed company back in 2022. And then we've just recently done a secondary listing on the Australian Stock Exchange. Finding it very easy to raise capital in Australia. There's a lot of money for mining projects there. Our difficulty is in the Canadian market and the Australian market in the aftermarket. We're finding absolutely no support whatsoever. We raised money at 50 cents. We reported a 1.4 billion tonne measured and indicated resource, largest titanium and rare earths project in the world in Brazil. Great jurisdiction. Everyone loves the project. Our stock price went from 50 cents to 72 cents when we announced the resource, and we're trading at about 20 cents now. And that's purely because absolutely no liquidity in the market, no retail investors are buying the stock. We're not looking to raise money, and we're looking at various non-equity financing, like selling a royalty. We're speaking to the DFC about funding and technical assistance. What's your solution to generating retail investment or on-market buying in, obviously an extremely valuable project trading at a huge discount?
One of the things that people don't do enough, they attend a lot of conferences, but they don't actually go to the mine site. So, when I worked in Gaspé Copper, it was a big visual what goes on there. It's a beautiful place, kind of remote in those days. I'm sure it still is. Taking people to a location is a really good way of getting some institutional interest. There was a company that I financed, the first silver company on the Toronto Stock Exchange, actually, that was Mexican. So on the way to, we decided, this was kind of institutional investors and investors, retail investors, like parties if you're successful, and they want to see success. So I took them to the property, which was maybe an hour and a half from Acapulco, which at that time was a very safe place and attractive place to have a closing dinner. So we walked this property, and it was, one of the properties was Los Filos, which was a 2 million ounce deposit, high grade. And those people walking that, retail, high net worth, research analysts, they got the picture right away. There was what ended up to be a series of 8 deposits, small. Each of them were a million ounces. But Newmont had a mill there. So it was like a great opportunity. And we financed that company privately. In those days, I think the first round was like $18 million. And privates are virtually impossible today. And yet, so taking them to the site, trying to get some technical person behind the property. Titanium is difficult, but it's also, I think, a critical metal and has incredible uses in aviation and other technology uses. So take them to the property. I know there are quite a few titanium deposits, good ones in Quebec, actually. So taking them to the property, get some really good technical support. But the technical support has to be simple because investors don't have a lot of time. So if it gets too complex, they'll walk away, they'll back off. So I would say, talk to me or other people and try to get people to come out and do it in the summer. Okay. Thank you very much. I really appreciate your help today.